Hello there, this is your friendly neighborhood Chinese man and welcome to this sort of Convallaria video. So in this sort of Convallaria video, we're going to talk about the ultimate equipment or weapons tier list because I do intend to save the trinket side for another video. So we'll start with the weapons first because there's quite a bit of weapons to talk about. And for this tier list itself, we will be evaluating the weapon based on the usefulness for the different units that can use the weapon itself, as well as giving the tier rating, right, provided by the author from the Gamekee website. So this tier list is from the Gamekee website. It has all the tier ratings, the different description which I'm translating, as well as the recommended units for the different weapons out there. So before I start, first of all, I'm not going to translate the skill description because you guys can go into the game itself, go into the weaponry trial, go to this present over here, and then click on the weapons to see the skill at 1 star level 1 as well as level 60 5 star over here. So you will be able to see the minimum as well as maximum potential for the weapons within the game itself. So I'll leave it to you guys to sort of review the weapons that you want and then farm the respective weapons for your units. Okay, so that's for the weapon description. I will start off with the staff category first because the staff has quite a bit of good weapons in a sense, because for the staff side, it's mostly used by the magical damage dealer as well as your support units, which are your healers. So there are quite a few staff that are generally useful right here. So first of all, let's start with the very first one, Resentment Broom, which deals AoE damage boost, right? So there is a 15% damage boost for AoE damage, and when you are actively attacking your enemy, there's a percentage chance for you to do additional life loss, which is more DOT damage for more damage boost for the team itself. So therefore really useful for all the AoE damage dealers or the DOT damage dealers or units which buffs DOT skills in general, or just useful in conditions with the DOT damage buff, right? For example, the previous week's Tower of Conquest, this stuff is going to be quite strong there, and that's for the Resentment Broom T0 right here. So the very first weapon. The second weapon is Starry Sky Heritage, which is a massive HP percentage boost upwards to 10% with the ability to add additional magical attack based on your HP itself. So this is the single best, I'll say, like most well-rounded stuff in the sense it is useful generally across the different characters that can use the stuff. You can use this on the supports because the additional magical attack allows the unit to heal better, right? It also allows the damage dealer to do more damage, and additional HP allows the unit to be a little bit tanky, which is generally useful. So in all honesty, I think the Starry Sky Heritage is probably the best stuff of them all in terms of versatility. Then we have the focus one. So this one, compared to the Resentment Broom on top, the broom is for the single target range. I mean, this one is for the single target stuff. So this increases the single target skill range plus damage, which is in comparison to the AoE side. So this is if you are going for the single target skill builds for the different characters, you can use it for those characters itself. So I think in terms of the recommended units right here, we have the Flame Mage, we have Lash, we have Barrel, because they are like the top tier magical damage dealers, and depending on which side of their skill build you use the most, right, equipping the optimal stuff would be the way to go, right, depending on how you are building up the team itself. So let's say if you are using like Barrel's choo for the single target damage, then I think focus one will be the one that you want to use, right, because you want to get the increased range as well as damage boost. Whereas let's say if you're using the AoE burn and cheese build, then Resentment Broom will be the better stuff to go for if you're building your unit that way, or you're using Barrel mostly for those kind of situations. So that's for the focus one as well as Resentment Broom. All three of them, they are T0, so that's for the damage dealing stuff or ones. And then next we have the support side. So the fourth weapon is the Cornucopia weapon, Cornucopia staff, which is for energy regeneration as well as HP recovery. So this is for all the different healers with massive energy requirement skills, right, to spam their skills. Most healers have very low CD heals, but some of them have really like high energy costs. So this weapon will be generally useful, but in most cases, I'll say if you have good energy management with good NRG support from other units, I think this stuff is not as highly rated because as long as you're managing your energy well, you're using like your skills, your tactics for, like, for example, like urgent order for energy regen, this stuff might not be as useful, right, in terms of comparing over, like, for example, Starry Night Heritage, which just gives you like more magical attack for more heals and stuff. So therefore I think this is T0, right? Don't get me wrong, the reason why it's T0 is because this is like useful on a lot of different healers, right? Useful on Samantha, Inanna, Angel, as well as the other healer girl in the 4-star category. So that's why the author gave it T0. But I generally think that if you have decent energy management, since this is like a pay to win stuff, this is from the battle pass itself, it's not farmable, so it's not like as highly rated for for me. I'll put it in T1. Like, it's a good stuff, but not the best, obviously. That's why I won't give it T0. Then next, we have the Reorganized Cube, which is the 5th weapon down here. So this is the best weapon for healer with heal percentage boost, as well as the ability to dispel from the ally, which is what the healers want to do. So therefore, right, if you are talking about the best support weapon, it will definitely be Reorganized Cube. In terms of the best general staff weapon, it will be Starry Sky Heritage for just general magical damage boost. But if you have a specific way to build your magical damage dealer, right, for example the AoE side, then it's Resentment, right? If it's the single target side, then the focus one will be the way to go. So that's for the T0 weapons for the staff category. So next we talk about the other stuff, or the other ones over here. So that's the Gazing Orb, Explosive Crystal, as well as Ink Totem. So I think generally these are like early game T1 weapons. In a sense, they do their job really well, right? You get them to 5-star really easily to get like really good early game single target damage boost, as well as early game AoE damage boost for the different magical damage dealers, but they eventually fall off in terms of stats as well as ability power level. So therefore they are in the T1 category. Still really good, I think, in the early game, especially for people who are not able to farm a lot of legendary weapons yet. You can definitely upgrade them. But if you do get the above weapons here, then you probably don't want to spend resources further in these weapons right here. So that's for the lower rarity ones. There's this UR weapon known as the Skeleton Staff. So Skeleton Staff increases HP, and when your ally is defeated, you get 1 energy recovery. So you can do this once every turn. So this HP increase is not as useful in a sense, because there's already another staff that increases HP on top, which is the Starry Sky Heritage, and this one gives you just raw magical attack boost, which gives you more damage and more heals, compared to this one, which gives you energy recovery, and you get energy recovery from the Cornucopia stuff anyway. So if you want energy recovery, then Cornucopia should be the way to go. And the recovery only comes after your ally is defeated. So obviously you're not going to use this in your I'll say like your Tower Conquest, because usually you have this if 2 allies dies and then you fail the mission kind of condition. So therefore this stuff in general is just not really good, and honestly speaking you just have way better options. Therefore the author put it in the T2 category. So that's for the staff side. Okay, let me scroll down, let me zoom out so that you guys can sort of see everything better. Okay, so wait, let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, okay, so now let's move on. So next we have the Sword and Dagger category. So I think this is more of the daggers. Yeah, I think this is more of the daggers. Wait, let me see. Because there's another sword category down there. Yeah, so this is the Sword and Daggers category. So there is quite a few units that could benefit from these weapons right here. But there are 3 T0 weapons. Number 1 is the Sword of Life. Number 2 is the Void Step. And number 3 is the Cornucopia Dagger. So Sword of Life increases HP for better survival, right? Upwards to 10% HP increase, as well as gaining attack based on your HP itself. So actually this one is quite useful for units like Maisha, who is generally tanky, right, with the ability to benefit a little bit from the attack increase. So Sword of Light is also just generally good for all the different like seekers that just wants a little bit more HP to survive tricky situations. So I'll say like generally one of the more versatile daggers out there. So Void Step, right, is massive increase in crit, right, upwards to 15%. And when you're using your skill, there's this 1 stack of Void. So Void increases crit damage by 5%. You can stack up to 6 layers, so upwards to 30% crit damage increase, which is massive, right? So this is more for the bursty type of assassins. So I guess if you are using your assassins, your seekers that way, then Void Step will be the best for damage boosting. Whereas for Sword of Life, I think it's more for sword users, which generally wants a little bit more tankiness while benefiting a little bit more from the damage boost itself. So I think Maisha would be a good choice for Sword of Life, because she's generally like always on the front line. And in terms of, I'll say like the HP increase, I think percentage HP increase will benefit units which are tankier by their base stats itself. So your seekers who are generally, I'll say like more frail, right, they do benefit from the HP increase, but it's not as efficient as compared to like, for example, like my thought, which is like just a generally higher HP character. So that's for this weapon, Sword of Life. And then we have the Cornucopia Dagger right here. So Cornucopia Dagger is when you are moving, right, if you're in a healthy state, there's a percentage chance for you to recover energy. So your standard Cornucopia ability. So this Cornucopia Dagger over here is insanely helpful in this category. Is T0. You guys will realize Cornucopia not being really good in other categories, but only good in the mage side as well as this side, because because there is a lot of weapons with a lot of high energy skills but with like insanely low CD. So for example, like Maisha's heal, the feast, the big feast, there is like 3 energy cost. So this ability to recover 2 energy just off the weapon alone allows her to spam that skill to provide a ton of heal as well as blocking for your team itself. So there are a lot more units that will benefit from the energy recovery, right? And it's more useful for, I'll say, like more units which can use this weapon, so therefore it's T0. So this is the Cornucopia dagger. Okay, next let's move on. Moving on to T1 and T2. So T1 we have Ever Burning Blade, so this is just additional DOT damage from the Scorch. So this is useful for certain bossing contents if you need more damage to sort of bring down the enemy itself. So next we have the Beheading Machete. So this is the second weapon here. So this is 5th weapon, T1 as well. So this is when you're attacking from the high ground, there's this additional attack boost upwards to 15%, which is massive. But I think in terms of this high ground advantage, there isn't really like a lot of units that can do long range attacks. So Dentalier is one of them, where you're able to use a skill from a range, which means that you can stand on a high ground and then use your skill, and therefore you can benefit from the buff. But for most of the assassins or most of the dagger sword user, they're more like they want to close in on the unit. So this boost is massive, but then it's only suitable for a certain few units that want to hold high ground. So high land or high ground is usually held by all your snipers and rangers. So this weapon over here is not effective now, not as effective, but has good potential in the future with units that benefit from the high land buff or wants to play the high land in general for your general contents or even bossing stuff. So that's for this weapon. So very map dependent as well as unit dependent, but it's a good weapon nonetheless. So next one we have epic weapon. So this one is Dueling Dagger. So this is a decently good defensive dagger with the ability to increase your physical damage. So if you're using it on your Mytha as well as your Tiden right here, then this is a good dagger or sword that you can use. I think it's a sword. It is called, is it Dueling Dagger? It's named Dueling Dagger in the game, I think, but it looks like a sword. Okay, I think it's, I'll just name it a dagger. Anyway, so it's in the same category. So next one, we have the Senator Swift Sword. So this one, it's a HP increase upwards of 15%, which is already sort of covered by Sword of Life. And on top of that, the second line of this weapon, right, when you're doing single target damage, you're able to do movement down. So I think this weapon is not that useful by the author's point of view in T2 because there's not a lot of unit that plays like this, especially for the tankers. I think most tankers want to stand on the front line, so like you're not gonna weave in and out like your assassins or rangers. So this movement speed down is a lot better for your archers or just units with range skills that can actually apply the debuff safely without risking their own life. So this weapon right here, I think, has a lot of potential depending on how you play, right? Because movement speed down is actually really powerful for cheesing contents, but then like in terms of general versatility, I think Senator Swift Sword is just not very versatile, so therefore there's not much recommendation. But I think depending on the map, depending on the condition, this is a decently good weapon. Okay, it's not like generally versatile, but decently good if you want to abuse the movement speed down to cheese content. So that's for this Swift Sword. So now we have the other epic weapons, Ceremonial Knife as well as Precision Forged Dagger. So Ceremonial Knife is insanely good if you can run to the enemy's backline because the additional crit is massive, but this weapon is not useful against bossing contents because the boss will always be front facing you. So therefore the author put this weapon in the T2 category. And then there's this Precision Forged Dagger, which requires your enemy to have a move down debuff. So you can use it together with Senator Swift Sword, but then like what if your enemy is immune to move down? Then this weapon will just be like like a normal weapon without any boost at all. So generally not a good weapon, and just no unit wants to use it, so therefore it's in the T3 category. Okay, so this is for the weapons itself. Okay, so take a glance, and I'll move up to let you guys see the weapons from the T0 category as well as the recommended units. Take a screenshot if you want to, and then let's move upwards for the staff. Okay, so these are the different epic staff, and these are the different T0 weapons, the endgame stuff and ones that you guys want for the different characters. Okay, so take a screenshot already. Let us move on down to the other weapons. So there is quite a bit of content to cover, therefore I'm going a little bit fast. Okay, so next we move on down to the Move on down to the Halberd / Hammer category. So I'll talk about the T0 first as usual. We have Fist X, we have Tuning Hammer, as well as Holo X. So Fist X over here is basically a massive damage boost, upwards to 20% attack increase when your HP value is higher than your opponent, which is quite easy to achieve because generally you want to be healthier in terms of HP percentage when you're using your skill, because if you're under, then you will be debuffed by all the dying as well as unhealthy debuff, which reduces your damage. So generally this condition is quite easy to achieve if you have healers to just heal your HP up, for your unit to weave in and out to use their skills, and when you defeat the enemy you get additional heal, which will help you sort of sustain this higher HP percentage compared to your enemy kind of concept. So very good weapon here. And then we have Tuning X, so this is 100% dispel plus physical attack increase, so very stable weapon that can be used by multiple X / Halberd users. So that's for the Tuning Hammer. Generally I think useful. Dispel is going to be really useful in cases where units have a ton of buff, like especially with those level 3 buff or even level 2 buff. That's already pretty massive, so being able to just remove it is pretty insane. And we have the Holo X. So Holo X increases physical defense or defense in general, and you get a physical attack increase based on your magical and physical yeah, so the second line is increase in your attack based off your physical and magical defense upwards to 10%. So this hammer or this X right here is suitable for frontliners that's good at dealing damage, namely Magnus right here. So therefore Magnus is recommended because most frontliners are defensive by nature, but there are certain frontliners that wants to tank up, right, with high defense while dealing damage at the same time. So these units generally they are very low in mobility. They're just like, I'm gonna move slowly and then I'm gonna use my skill and then bring you now, right, force you to a corner kind of concept. So Magnus is one of them, and I think this weapon will definitely see use in the future. I think with the introduction of, I can't remember which unit had like this exact same kit that wants more defense, can't remember exactly, but one of the later units. So this X is gonna be pretty future proof as well, so therefore in the T0 category. Okay, so next let's move on to the other hammers or the other X's. So we have the T1 Balance X, followed by Cornucopia X, Denial X, Anti-Magic X, Brutal X, and lastly the Formidable X. So for the fourth weapon, right, the very first one, Balance Heavy X over here, this is upwards to 12% attack increase when you're in a healthy state. So pretty easy to achieve and really good in the early game. So if you did get this and you're still in the early game, you can definitely use this on most of your X users, right? For example, the 4-star X girl or even Raria in general. So next one we have the Cornucopia X. So Cornucopia X is like the general ability of Cornucopia X is just energy recovery, which also has this additional heal when you are in this dying state. So it's good for defensive frontliners that abuses a lot of their skills with high energy cost. So generally I think in this category there isn't really a lot of units for that. Although I think Raria can actually benefit from this because Raria is actually quite, I'll say, like energy intensive. Like that skill combo from that ultimate or that slam itself is like 3 energy, so this 2 energy recovery might be quite useful for her. But generally I think most of the units in this category, they did rather have just either massive damage boost, right, or defense boost to let them tank better rather than abusing their skills in general. So therefore it's T1 here. So this is what I mean by the weapons could be lower in terms of tier based on how many units want to use this skill. So I do think that energy recovery is a very subjective topic in a sense, depending on how you play, because there are certain players that likes to run around, for example like myself. So running around, getting the energy regen and then abusing my skill is something that I do like to play. So if you give this weapon to me, I might even give it a T0, right, because that's what I usually do for my playstyle. So that's why it's pretty subjective, but this is T1 based on the Gamekee author's point of view. Okay, so this is the Cornucopia X. Next we have Denial X. So Denial X right here is only useful when you are charging. So the boost, it's good. It's 20 upwards to 25%. It's massive, because if you take a look at this, right, this is only 20% for the Phase X, but Phase X has a much easier to achieve condition compared to this one, because you need to be charging the enemy. So there's currently only one unit that benefits from this weapon, or I think there are some lower rarity ones that benefits from this weapon, but they must be charging. So I'll say more than half the time it's useless on most of the units. And even on units that benefit from this buff, if the weapon, the unit is not using like a charging skill, then you won't actually get this massive damage buff. So only really useful in very niche conditions. Okay, so that's why it's like T1. But the second line is, if your HP percentage is higher than your enemy, then you will actually able to proc this buff. So it's quite easy to achieve. The difficult part is you need to be charging, right? You need to be charging. So the charging part is where I think, number one, you have to use a skill that charges at the enemy, right? Number two, you have to use it on units with the ability to charge in the first place. So therefore, I think in terms of versatility, it's not as good. Therefore, it's only T1. But with future units with the ability to charge, with all the striker units that wants to charge on the front line, this weapon will definitely go up in terms of rating itself. So the last three weapon, your not so good one, actually no, Anti-Magic Act is basically a budget version of Tuning Hammer with the Dispel ability. So the epic weapon after the Nio X. Okay, so it's T1, just a budget dispel. And then we have Brutal X. So Brutal X, right, increases HP upwards to 10%, and when you're attacking, if your HP percentage is lower than the target, right, you can ignore the target's defense upwards to 40%. So the defense ignore is massive. 40% defense ignore is massive. But you need to be lower HP percentage than the enemy, which is probably not something you want, because like number one, like I mentioned earlier, if your HP percentage is lower, chances are you're either in an unhealthy or the dying state. So you are already taking more damage, so your units will die more easily if you don't finish off the enemy. And the thing is, when you're on the, like, you can't really use it when you're ahead, like when you are having more HP percentage than the enemy, especially against bosses itself, right? Like if you want to hit the boss down, so it's good for like sort of bringing the HP bosses down before a certain percentage, but then you need to sustain your team up. Though after you reach this, I think like 50% mark, where the boss's HP drop to 50% and below, and your HP needs to be above the 50% for you to get maximum damage output, then this X falls off quite a bit. Therefore, like it's T2. Like yeah, generally I think the conditions is just really hard to achieve, so therefore really low. Agree with this. Then we have Formidable X, so T3. Like breakers don't hold the high ground, right? It's either the snipers or the assassins, so therefore not really that good. Maybe in arena, if you position your breaker on the pillar on top, then that's high ground advantage. So that's that. And let's move on to the bows. So we are left with two more categories of weapon. For the bow side, I think bow side, it's subjective, right? There's only one T0 weapon for this category, which is Longbow of Marthas, because this one just gives you like flat 10% physical attack boost when you max it out at 5-star, and on top of that you have this 10% damage debuff, which is good for bossing, which is good for just general contents, which is why like this is the best bow according to the author. But I do think that Aerial Combat Bow is actually not bad, but the Aerial Combat Bow is one which increases your physical attack, right, and give you a 20% upwards to 20% damage boost. So 10 10 15 15 20 when it's on the enemy's turn. So this is more used for alert type units, where they set their skills and then they wait for the enemies to come into range, and then they attack them during the enemy turn. So it's actually, I'll say, like a pretty decent buff, but I think the playstyle is quite rigid. So therefore, like, it's T1 because it's not optimal to send on the spot, and you need really good map awareness to predict whether or not the AI or the enemy is going to move there. Or if you're playing against like live PvP in the future, alert type skills will be less efficient unless the unit has a really big AoE coverage itself. So I genuinely think that Aerial Crossbow can be T0, but I think it depends on the meta as well as how you play and even your skill build for your unit. So it's more for the alert type skills. So T1, I think in terms of versatility, T1 is fair, but power level wise, I think it's definitely T0. So next one, Meteor Line, is decent attack attack boost, 5% attack boost with an ability to apply debuff. So the debuff is random. It could be attack debuff or even a defense debuff. So just a debuff, generally good stuff, but a little bit of RNG involved. So if you don't have all these good bows on top, right, this steel crossbow is insane. I've been using it on ballista a lot. The ignore defense just allows me to do a lot more damage. Yeah, because it's just when you're attacking, you ignore upwards to 25% of the enemy's defense, which procs all the time, right? So very good skill, very cheap weapon to upgrade as well. In fact, I think you can actually even use this towards the late game, because like ignore defense is just so good. And when you got so many archers in the team that you want to run, right, you want to max out all your weapons to 5-star to get their best skills, this is one weapon where I think it goes really late as well. So this is for the steel crossbow. And we have the other weapons, T1/T2 category. So now 5, we have star rate crossbow. So this one, this is a crit rate increase upwards to 15%, so 6, 8, 10, 12, 15. And when you're doing a single target attack, there's a 50, 60, 70, 80, 100% chance for you to do additional piercing damage. So this is a good bow, okay? But this is not a good early game bow. You need this bow to be at least, I'll say, 5-star. 80% chance is pretty much all the time, right? But you want 100% chance, which is 5-star, for it to maximize the ability. So I think, in fact, if you have this at 5-star, this weapon is actually in the T0 category. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, certain ideas which I kinda disagree with the author of this list, because I think he's evaluating this from a more budget point of view, but I'm evaluating this in terms of the max potential of the weapon. So this star rate crossbow is insane with that 15% crit boost, as well as this additional piercing damage once you max it out, because it's 100%, right? Which means that it procs all the time. So that's why I'll give this T0. This is one of the bow which is good if you build it up, right? If you don't build it up at a lower 50% chance, is a little bit iffy, but then just based off that 15% crit boost, right, it's already decent enough. So this is my opinion about star rate crossbow. And then we have Whale Hunter. So Whale Hunter is for infection teams. Pretty good last week, because you can use it with the Outlaw Archer for the infection damage, for you to stack up damage over time. Very decent there, but very specific in terms of team setup, as well as the units that wants to use it. So right here, there's a Lily Whale and this Viridian Archer, Valdarian Archer. Then we have this Valdarian Longbow. So the condition for you to get this additional crit boost upwards to 25%, it's a little bit challenging, right? 4 range distance might be a little bit hard to proc all the time, depending on the map, as well as how the conditions on the map work. But it's a good bow if you're able to fulfill the conditions. So generally, I think all the archers can use it, especially I think archers like Ballista with insanely long range. Divine Grace as well as Ballista has just like this single target skill that goes like 4 range, right? So that skill will 100% proc this crit rate boost, which is pretty good, right, most of the time. So next one, we have Cornucopia Bow. So yeah, Cornucopia Bow is T2 or T3 in the archer category, because I personally have no issue with Ballista in terms of energy usage, so I don't think I need the additional energy. Not sure about every other archer, but I think in terms of looking at sheer damage output as well as crit damage boost, all the other weapons are just better, right? Like I mentioned earlier, energy regeneration is pretty subjective. If you manage your energy well, if you have tactics to back you up, Cornucopia Bows actually generally, I think, fast pretty lowly in terms of my honest take, depending on the class. So for archers, generally they have very low energy cost skills, so this 2 energy regen will just cause an overflow of your weapons in terms of the, overflow of energy, which is pretty useless. Therefore I think this is, I'll say T3, not even T2. Then there's this Hunter Bow, which is, yeah, only good for the move down debuff, so very niche and very weak, doesn't give you more damage, so that's why it's down there, T3. Okay, so now we are finally at the very last weapon category, the staff / halberd category. Okay, so for this one, the first one, Nimbler Staff. So this Nimbler Staff increases mobility by 1 additional tile, and when you're attacking, right, if the movement tile or distance is bigger than 3, you increase your crit rates upwards to 15%. So very good to increase mobility on like low mobility unit. I think this is going to be excellent for Leonidas, because Leonidas is a very low mobility unit. So that one addition tile is pretty helpful for units that fits into this category. Xavier's also one of them, so therefore Xavier's is in a recommended tier. I think for Gloria's case, it's not a major issue in terms of mobility, because Gloria's quite mobile even without this weapon, but I think having one additional tile to allow Gloria to sort of weave in and out more conveniently is generally useful. So this is one weapon which fits my playstyle a lot, and I do think that this weapon is really good if you like to sort of weave in and out, reposition yourself. So very good weapon here. I think just additional one tile bonus changes a lot of battle setting, right, in terms of kiting your enemies, in terms of cheesing your enemies. So next we have the double-sided halberd. So this is a massive, not massive, 5% attack boost. Okay, so decent, right? It's a decent attack boost, but this gives you massive damage boost the more enemies you hit. So this is when you are dealing your AoE damage. Every enemy hit increases the damage upwards to 5%, so you can get upwards to 24% damage boost if you're hitting 3 enemies. So for Gloria skill, for example, when you throw the halberd, right, to do the flex skill, you can actually get this maximum boost really easily. And even when you're using the thrust skill, it's upwards to 2 enemies, so quite easy to proc the boost, and I think generally good for units that deals AoE damage or likes to go into the enemy and then just hit as many enemies as possible. So that's for the double-sided halberd. And then for the third T0 spear, skeleton spear, so this one just gives you the best attack boost, 10% raw physical attack, as well as additional piercing damage. So this is just for additional DPS. I think this is probably the best for Gloria, because if you're building her in terms of the DPS side, if you're using her to just deal damage, the additional physical attack gives you just like raw damage numbers, and piercing damage is just really good, and Gloria herself has really good mobility, so this weapon I think would be the best for her compared to like maybe the Nimbler staff or even the double-sided halberd. Although the two weapons on top, they're all really good for the different recommended weapons, but I mean the different recommended characters, but I think for Gloria's case, this is probably the best weapon for her. So skeleton spear right here. And then moving on to the T1 T2 category, so we have the pendant halberd, which is this first weapon here. So this is for defensive frontline. So Tempest is the best guy recommended, because this one gives you HP boost upwards to 10%, and when you are targeted for single target skills itself, your physical attack, your attack as well as defense increases by 10%. So just additional defensive boost when you're being attacked. Very good for Tempest. And next one we have Cornucopia Halberd. So energy recovery, subjective, like I mentioned as usual. So here it's given to T1, and then there's Doomsday Scythe. So this is when you're attacking enemies from the back. So I think, right, if there's a striker that likes to play like an assassin that goes to the back line and hit people from the back, then this is actually pretty massive. Like 35% is huge, but at least based on the units that can use it now, it's not exactly the best. So like I'll put it in T1, right, because the effect is insane, but right, because there's not a lot of units that can benefit from that, it's not exactly like the best one. Yeah, it's not exactly that good, but I do use this on Gloria, because Gloria is very mobile, so it allows my Gloria to move to the back of the enemy and then just pierce them. So that massive damage boost actually is pretty significant. Now it's at level 3, right? So 80% is really big. So if you're able to bring it to 25%, that's a massive boost. So this weapon is not bad, it's just not versatile on a lot of units, therefore it's rated as T2, but I do think it's worthy of a T1 minimally, just based off the effect itself. So then we have all the epic spears, which in general they are just like early game weapons, which you probably shouldn't invest further by now, so therefore I'm not going to talk too much about them. They're all the early game good stuff for the different spears or halberd holders. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this tier list, right? I'll be including the link to the tier list in my description, as well as my comment section down below, so feel free to visit the website to just take a glance in terms of the different weapons, but it's mostly in Chinese, so if you guys can't read it, use your Google lenses to translate the different stuff. I'll be doing another video for the trinket category, which is the armor, probably tomorrow, because trinket itself is another pretty massive topic that can be really subjective as well. So that's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe to see more. See you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.